Hello everybody, welcome to Talks with Adri. Today is our fourth episode and we're going to talk about the human origin. This is the second part. In part number 1, we talk about the human evolution and how Darwin's theory is not valid anymore and how the different civilizations arose. Later, we discuss Earth's history with the arrival of all the peoples of the stars that contributed with their DNA into our blood, into the modern human, into the Homo sapiens sapiens. Today we're going to see what does the ancient civilizations had to say about this. Let's check the myths. We're going to start with the Egyptians. As we remember in the episode 1, Num, the cosmic liquid, which we don't know if it's a he or a she, is with an androgynous gender, is going to be the same character as Atum and Ra, as well as Num. So Num gave birth to the other gods, like Isis, Set, Osiris, Nephthys, and these other gods were opposite forces that they had to fight in order to create a final order. But they continuously fight one another, with the gods of compassion and love, with the god of destruction, and so on. But Num, that is usually depicted also like a ram-headed man, is going to be said that he created men out of his wheel of clay. Men were done with clay, with mud of the Nile River, and he's going to build them in his wheel of clay. Several historic inscriptions are going to say that Num created both aspects of humans, which are the ka, the soul or the energy, and the body with the clay. There is no difference in the moment of creation of the man and of the woman. If we're going to see, after the first couple, which are Isis and Osiris, came the rest of humanity. And it was a couple because in Egyptian tradition, everything has to be balanced. It was the opposite forces pulling one to another one, so we needed both in order to have a perfect creation. And women had a great status or a very balanced status in ancient Egypt. We're going to see that they were able to occupy high positions. They were queens, they were goddesses, they were priestesses. They were also have a lot of rights. They were able to divorce when needed, when they wanted, and justice was the same for both genders. But if we are going to see among their deities, it is very special that most of them have no gender or that they are androgynous. Here we have Num, and it is not very clear if he is a male or a female. Here we're going to see that thought also helped Num in the creation of humans. And he is here with the tree of life. The tree of life for the Egyptian tradition was the point where you can visualize the cycle of life and death. So the tree of life is going to face to the east where the sun comes out and it represents the birth. And then the sun goes to the west where he hides, and then it is going to be the death. So this tree of life represents the sunrise and sunset of the sun, which represents the light and the dark, the day and the night, the life and the death, and this continuing cycle that we have. So this is also the tree of knowledge, getting to know that we are in these cycles. Here we have the first couple, Isis and Osiris, and we're going to see that they also were in the tree and that they were eating of the fruit of knowledge. But this time, different from the Bible perspective, we're going to see that eating from the fruit of knowledge made them responsible of their destiny. They had now the understanding, the possibility to discern if they were doing right or wrong. So that makes them responsible of their destiny. And if we see in the previous pictures, usually Num is depicted or portrayed as a giant. He is very big as compared to the humans that he creates. And it is the same with most of the gods that are from a different size than the rest of humans. This is not something that happens only in Egypt, but in most of the ancient cultures. We're going to find, for example, sarcophagus that are very big, not for normal humans. We are also going to find these wall paintings where one man is standing up and two men are his same size. Or for example here, this big tall man and these other men working for him. This is a mummy, and it is a finger of a mummy. And if you see, each of the bones here is longer than 10 centimeters. So we have the first part 10 centimeters, more than 10 centimeters, and 17 centimeters, the third part of the finger, which is like 3 times our normal finger. This is a knife as compared to a human hand. Only to work with that knife, it's going to be very uncomfortable because it is a tool that it is not done for our size. Big skulls, skeletons of different dimensions. So we're going to see that it is not only that crazy Egyptians that started painting on the walls or carving on the stones that the gods and later on the descendants of these gods were big. There is something else. Here we have the temple of Edfu. You can see the big size of the first door of the entrance as compared to the people. And here the gods had to stand up because it was a ritual for initiation. So it also shows that these gods in a way were living creatures on earth. It was not like they were there, no, that they were here, and in this temple they came and they have to stand up in order to be initiated. So it has to be a big entrance, it has to be a big, let's say, environment for them to fit. Here we have another one where there is giant people and little people, the one that are moving the boat. And here we have a giraffe, and look the size of these men. Look at giraffe today and the size of a normal man today. So why are they going to paint these things? And there are so many, you can see, and if one day you go to Egypt, please pay attention to these different sizes. Here we have another example of this guy that it is touching or rubbing or massaging these big feet. Here this is Ra, and look the lion, and look the man here. So you see, there is like a lot of allegories and things in ancient Egypt that show us that not all men were the same size. Later we're going to see why this is important. And if we remember in the first episode, we mentioned that the first giants arrived 1 million years ago and that they populated Earth. Let's continue with the Greeks. So in the Greek myth of creation, we're going to see that at the beginning was the chaos, and out of the chaos started Gaia with Eros, and they brought Uranus, and then Uranus and Gaia brought Cronus, and Cronus had different sons, but he was fearing that any of them will take his power. And out of Cronus came up Zeus, and Zeus is going to defeat his father. But at the end, with all these titans that came out of Cronus, Zeus being one of them, and with the Cyclopes, and with the other, there were already giants here, by definition. And Prometheus is going to be the one who is going to create humanity. He says that they were already, the creation was made, the animals were made, but that he, out of clay, created the men. And Athena, his cousin, is going to be the one that is going to blow and give them soul. So it was not only enough to build them out of clay. There was something else that was needed, and it was this breath of life in the same way that the Egyptians say it was not only the body, but also it was required the soul. And then Epimetheus, which is Prometheus' brother, is the one in charge of giving all the qualities to the different creatures. So Prometheus asked him to give the qualities to humans. And he's going to say, no, but I already gave all the qualities. So Prometheus said, okay, so I'm going to allow them to stand up in 2 legs and I'm going to give them fire. Zeus didn't like this at all. He's going to take away the fire from the humans, and at the same time he's going to say that they have to worship the gods, and for every sacrifice that they do, they have to give part to the gods. Prometheus didn't like this because humans were his favorite creation. So he is going to return back the fire to the people, and he was punished by Zeus for that, and humans were punished as well. The punishment for these first men was to create the woman. So Zeus is going to create Pandora, and Pandora is a special lady, the first woman, and he gave her the curiosity. So Pandora is going to be very curious, and at the same time he's going to give her a box, and he says, you can't open this box. And all her life she's struggling because she is very curious to know what is inside the box and why she can't open it. And one day she decides to open it, and a lot of evil comes out of it. Disgrace, illnesses, and many things. But even though she was very affected with all these calamities, at the end there was hope. So she stays with the hope, but Zeus is going to punish both the man and the woman, and they have basically to start from zero. Prometheus is also punished. So here it is very clear that the Greek mythology had a lot of things in common with the Bible, with the Egyptian tradition, but especially these things, that everything comes from one source, this source apparently being water or cosmic liquid, then the gods, the creation of the gods, these gods fighting in order to see who rules and who dominates, using the elements and the powers of nature. Then out of clay the creation of men, and then a god that is not completely happy with these humans that were so similar to them, and he wanted to take away the fire. Here we have Hermes and Aphrodite, and they had to be split in 2, and this is where the word hermaphrodite comes from. So apparently the initial nature of the humans or men was only one gender, or let's say both. In 189 before Christ, there was a Plato symposium where Aristophanes displays a knowledge of an ancient myth of the androgen, according to which our original nature was by no means the same as it is now. I'm going to read this for you. When the androgen was split into 2 halves, the distinct male and female sexes were created. Greece was an equalitarian culture. Men were holding most of the knowledge and the hierarchy, the positions. They were already a patriarchal society. But the myth of Pandora is going to lower the position of woman in the collective subconscious of men. Here we have another examples of the giants in ancient Greece. So we have, for example, the Cyclopes here. This is a drawing. Here we have also Athena fighting. And you can see the size of her as compared to this other person here. And here we have something that it was called the Gigantomachy. The Gigantomachy was a fight between the giants and the gods of the Olympus. So here you're going to see all these creatures, the beings that have wings, that are supposed to be in the Olympus, fighting with these other creatures. At the end, the gods won. Let's see now how it is the human origin according to the Torah, the Bible, and the Quran. These three sources are not the same. They are going to vary in little things. For example, the Quran is going to say that Adam and Eve were not on earth, that they were in heaven, and that when they were expelled from Eden, they basically came to earth. But besides these things, they are all going to say that the men were created out of clay, and first they were only men. In the Quran is not mentioned how the women were created, but in the Bible and in the Torah it is explained that out of a rib of Adam, when he was fall asleep, God created woman, and that it was important to stitch the ribs, the skin after removing the ribs. This could be a way of explaining that at the beginning he was not able to reproduce and that he was alone, and the other creatures had already a companion, and that's why God decided to give this new man a partner. But later they are tempted by the snake to eat of the tree of life, of the tree of knowledge. This tree was very clear by God that they could eat whatever they want, that they could be whatever they want, except eating from this tree. And Eve is going to be tempted by the snake, and she tries the fruit, and then God becomes very angry with them, and they are fired or expelled out of the paradise of the Eden or of the heaven. After this happened, we are going to see that women in all these Judeo-Christian religions are not going to be treated the same. They have to be ruled by men. And I'm going to read in the Bible in Genesis 16 where it says, "Into the woman he said, I will greatly multiply thee sorrow and thee conception. In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children, and thee desire shall be to thee husband, and he shall rule over thee." So from the very concept of religion, from the very beginning, there was not a possibility for the woman to be equal to men. We're going to see that the Torah and the Bible speak about giants. So I'm going to read you Genesis 6:4, which says, "There were giants in the earth in those days." Who created them? We're not sure, because Adam and Eve were supposed to be the first men. So these giants are not humans, or what? There are some things that there we still have to discover. But there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men. So here the Bible is explaining two different things. There are some that are the sons of God, which could be the gods that are presented in the other myths, in the other civilizations. But here in the Bible, there were supposed to be only Adam and Eve. So, all right. But it says, "When the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown." So even the Bible mentions that there were more creatures that also were intelligent, the sons of God that were later going to have children with the daughters of men. Listen to this. This is very important, especially in the next episode when we're going to talk about the Anunnaki. All right. And regarding the giants are mentioned many times in the Bible. There is one, like a whole race that it is very famous that are called the Nephilim. For example, in Numbers 13:32, 13:33, it says, "There was a whole population called the Anakim," mentioned several times in the Exodus. And if you see, for example, the Anakim, it is a very similar name to the Anunnaki. In the book of Samuel 2, 21 from 15 to 22, Also, there is described Goliath and how he fought with David in Chronicles 1, 24:8, Deuteronomy 9:2. Well, there are several passages in the Bible that describe different giants. If any of you is interested, just let me know and I just can send it to you. The places in the Bible where it talks about giants. So apparently humans were living at the same time with a different species, because they were definitely not humans, or at least in the Bible it makes a completely clarification of how different they were, because they were part of the creation of God on earth. So we don't know exactly if they were men, if they were giants or not, but all the mythologies in different parts of the world mention them. They mention them as a different species from humans. They also mention that when they were created, they were already here, and that we lived a period in time with them, they being physically on earth. We're going to see that women were created later, and the same as the Greeks, and here in the Judeo-Christian perception, the woman had something additional from men. She came later, she came a little bit more special, and that speciality was that she had the power of creation. Women are the ones that carry the uterus, the womb, in order to procreate, to continue the species. Men by themselves can't do it. So they had like a special power, and this had to be controlled. And for me, how I see the tree of knowledge is when men and women awake up. There is something else, and I awake up into my power. And I understand that maybe all these gods want to cover things from me, that they are not God itself. If you see, they are like these gods over there, even though if it is Yahweh, that doesn't want to show me the whole truth. Later, let's discuss the Mayan and the human creation. The Mayans are also going to believe in the tree of life, and the tree of life is going to be the roots that take us to our own subconscious or infra worlds, and up the trunk here is earth, where you can grow up in consciousness and touch heavens. At the beginning, the gods created men out of clay or out of mud. They are also going to talk about different deities creating the humans. For example, in the Popol Vuh, according to the Mayan tradition, the two creator gods were Gucumatz and Tepeyu. So they also created the earth out of the primordial sea, like the Egyptians, or out of this force in the cosmic world. And they decided to populate it with animals, and they wanted creatures to worship them, to live with them. So they made the first creation of mud. I'm going to read it to you. Part of the Popol Vuh. But they saw that it was still not good. It merely came undone and crumbled. It merely became sodden and mushy. It merely fell apart and dissolved. Its head was not set apart properly. Its face could only look in one direction. Its face was hidden. Neither could it look about. At first it spoke, but without knowledge. Straight away it will merely dissolve in water, for it was not strong. So they had to do another experiment, and they create the second man out of wood. In the same way, they populated the earth with these wooden men, but the gods didn't like it because they lack of a soul. And they were not as special creatures as they thought they were going to be. Finally, they create men out of corn. And this is very important, because when they come out of corn, remember that this agricultural period is what really creates civilization, what creates society, what allows men to specialize, to really develop the brain, to really think and create by themselves. Because before, it was not possible to do it. They said that these men that were created of wood after the flood, they became monkeys. But instead, these men out of corn were able to survive during the flood because they were intelligent. And I'm going to read this part. After making men of clay and later of wood, human beings were created out of mice. And this time the gods succeed. And until today, mice is still seen as a sacred and divine food and honored as such. But this time they were so perfect that the gods were scared that they become like them. So, this perfection alarmed the gods. It is obvious from the writings in the Popol Vuh that the gods did not want these creations to have the ability to become like gods themselves, but simply wanted to limit the capacity of humans to mere worship. So they became too perfect. So the Popol Vuh is going to say, the gods are alarmed that beings who were merely manufactured by them should have divine powers. So they decide, after their usual dialogue, to put a fog on human eyes. Next, they make 4 wives for the 4 men. And for these couples come the leading Quiche lineages. So if you see, also the gods feared that they were too close or too similar and also having powers, that they decide to put this fog, this veil. In all the traditions, there is something, it is this need of hide this knowledge to humans for a reason that still we don't know. Here we have the gods, after they make their council, their talk, their dialogue, and put the fog on men. This is the codex that explains that. These gods were also giants, and they were also responsible of the different forces of nature. So here you can see how these tall gods were creating the men. This is a chronic of the Spanish. It is in the Codex of the Vatican that said that the Americans, the Native Americans here, were hunting or killing giants that were around. And not only these, but we're going to see different giants also around the world. This, for example, is in China. It is from the year 5000. Here we have giants in South Africa. Look, the size of the bone of a femur, which is very different. This in terms of the total size of the final person. And here you have the web page, if you want to find it, or if you're in South Africa, if you want to visit. Giants in other parts of the world, here we're going to have the giant human skeleton recently discovered in Varna, Bulgaria. It is from 7,000 years ago. Here we have discovered in 2013 the skeleton of a giant warrior from 1600 before Christ in Romania. This was around 2 meters, where most of the population was 1.5 meter. In the chronics also described by the Portuguese, when they decided to go around America, they are going to say that they found incredible high, tall people that lived here. This is also a huge skeleton found in the mounds in the USA, and in many of the Native American myths, legends, traditions, they talk about giants. Later we're going to see that when we see with the Toltec legacy. It is a coincidence or why we find giants all around the world. Here we have also in India. And what it is important to see is the size as compared to the 2 persons that are working here. So all around the world. Here I'm going to say what we have in common about all these myths. So as I mentioned in the part 1, we have these other sources, channelers, people who tap into the Akashic records that says that there were giants on earth and that they were here before the humans were created, and also that we mixed with them, and additionally that later we carry in ourselves the DNA of these giants, their information. we're going to see that these myths all say that these gods that created us apparently were giants, or at least bigger than us, that they were not in heaven, that they were here on earth. For example, it says that God was walking on the Eden garden when they discovered Adam and Eve, and he asked them if they had eaten from the fruit of knowledge. So if he was walking, it means that they were closer, that they were walking on the same floor. So here we have that all of them in common have only one creator. I know that the Egyptians have a lot of deities, the Greeks had a lot of deities, and the Mayans mentioned different deities before, or like one source. But this is the source that is going to create the gods. And even in the Bible it says that the sons of the gods are completely different to the sons of men. So if it is like this primordial source is going to create gods, and later these gods are going to create humans. All of them have one creator in common. All of them except the Old Testament is going to talk about gods. But except with that Genesis paragraph that I read to you that mentioned that there are other gods, they are all going to agree with that. We're going to say also that the creation was first nature and then clay. And this also had to do with what the science evolution mentions, that first was the earth, later was the water, the microbes, the oxygen, the dinosaurs, later the mammals, later the flowers, and just very recently humans. Then we're going to see that the old nature was done first, and then man came out of clay or came out of mud. And it is so marvelous, or mysterious, or a great coincidence that the Mayans, the Old Testament, the Greeks, the Egyptians, they all mention this. Also, in order to create men, it was not necessarily only a body, because, for example, the Mayans created bodies in different ways, but until there was no soul, they were not the same as the gods, or it was not the same. So it is these two parts that really allows the Homo sapiens sapiens to be a special creature, and a special creature different from the other animals. Not only the soul, because the animals also have soul, but it is also this part that allows us to create, that allows us to discern, to see what is the difference between good and evil, to know, to have repentance, for example, to know if what you're doing is right or wrong, and create a society, a civilization with common beliefs. Later we're going to see that fire was given from the gods. So the Egyptians are going to say that it was given from the gods, the Greeks are going to say that it was given from the gods. The Old Testament doesn't mention it, but since the very beginning, like the Old Testament was written way later, and like it take it for granted, it is not specified in the Bible. The Mayans are going to say that they received this knowledge from the gods, and as we saw in the part 1, this is a very big jump in evolution, something that completely changes the unity consciousness for all men. They also have in common that humans are considered the gods' children, or the gods' special creation. So for the Egyptians, for the Greeks in the Old Testament, the Mayans, we are special, a little bit different from the others, from the rest. And that's why there is going to be one force that wants to defend us and another force that wants to hide things from us. Let's say it like that. In most of we can find that in common. Woman was created later. This is very well explained in the Greeks, is well explained in the Mayans, is well explained in the Old Testament, but it is not clear for the Egyptians. We're going to see here that for the Mayans, at the beginning, men were men, but from the very beginning, they also received their wives in order to be able to have the lineages or the descendants. In the Egyptians, instead, from the very beginning, these were this first couple. So this is one of the things that are going to radically change the way of thinking and how women and men were equalitarianly considered in Egyptian culture. The Mayans apparently the Mayans were also an equalitarian culture. The agriculture was given by the gods according to the Egyptians and according to the Mayans. The Greeks, let's say also that, and in the Old Testament there are later civilizations. Well, they already know how to cultivate, so it is not precisely described. But from the creation of fire, agriculture and language that are also going to say the Egyptians that is given by the gods, the Old Testament that is given by the gods, and the Mayans are going to say that is given by the gods. All these, it means that we needed help in order to really develop, in really to advance. Like if we were going to have the normal evolution of as a creature, we were not going to be able to make these jumps. Why were the gods so interested in teaching us all these things? Why did they wanted us to move on, let's say, to make us similar to them? We don't know. But apparently they assisted us in our process of evolution, especially in language, because the Egyptian language, the Mayan language, or the Nahuatl that is still alive, is in Mexico, it's a language that is alive. Also the Hebrews, trying to maintain Hebrew as a language, they carry a special energy. The same, the words in Sanskrit for the Hinduists. The way that it is said, it is not like the modern languages that are very good for communicating, but there is a force of creation behind them, a vibration. Something that takes you to a different level of consciousness, that transmits you an information, an additional information rather than only the word. So this is very sacred in all these ancient cultures because they understand the power of the language and the power of the creation through it. We're going to see also the veil. In all of them is present, in the Mayans, in the Old Testament, and in the Greeks. But if you see in the Egyptians, even though they don't have something that they were hiding directly from them, they had very clear that they were not like the gods and that they had to study and do a lot of rituals in order to become like them. So the Egyptians knew that they could become like the gods, but this knowledge was not for all. It was only for certain special persons. And they all mention giants. This is very interesting. At the same time, I let you believe what you want to believe. These are only facts taken from things that we have from the myths and from the recent archaeological discoveries, from the portraits, paintings, statues that ancient civilizations lived that are possible to study today. So I hope that this opens your mind and that we have a good seed in order to understand the Anunnaki experiment that we are going to explain in the next episode. So thank you for watching, and please write me your comments and your questions. Bye!